be doing is telling you how to make money. Well, if I could, I wouldn't be here. But what I would like to show you, also based on my experience, is how you can make your, let's say, your business cases more effective, more likely to get funding. I have some experience in this, not a big one, but I do have some experience. And what I'm doing as an economist, as an environmental economist, I'm doing the things that Eric is not very keen on. I'm doing environmental valuation. I'm actually putting economic values on environmental goods. And there was a question in the first lecture about if we should put economic values on environmental benefits and costs. That's what I'm doing. And it's true, it is a discussion, it's an ongoing discussion, but for you to sort of understand how that works, who of you remember the oil spill from the Deepwater Horizon in 2010, right? There was this big oil spill that took place in the Gulf of Mexico just out of the US, and actually there was another oil spill in 1992, the Exxon Valdez oil spill off the Gulf coast of Alaska. So what the US government wanted to do at that time, they wanted to say, okay, there's this big destruction from this oil spill, spoiled ecosystems, coastline, and so on. They're bringing the oil companies to court, Shell and BP at the Deepwater Horizon spill, and they said, okay, we need to have a methodology to value what's that cost to the environment, what was that cost to the ecosystem. And the methodologies used were the methodologies, some of them the ones that I'll be talking about. So you can't put economic values in the environment. It does stand in court, and I'm talking about US courts now, right? They get armies of lawyers, they get armies of other economists trying to make the case against that. So if the methodologies are able to stand in court, because all of them are being looked into very carefully, then you can also use them. So this is what I will be presenting today. So why do we need business cases? I know that you come from different backgrounds. This is a very multidisciplinary audience, and all of you, you come with a different identity, right? Some of you have natural science backgrounds, some of you have engineering backgrounds, some of you have architectural backgrounds, and you might not be very happy with seeing the environment that I'm sure you care for, and you appreciate it sort of being presented in monetary terms. It's not about sort of monetizing and depreciating the environment and say, okay, this is how much it costs. But I would like you to think about it as using monetary values as a common language, right? People understand trade-offs. When you talk about costs and benefits, people understand that because they do that every day in their lives. When they make decisions, they know that the decisions come with different costs, right? For example, you came here for this summer school, you could have done something else. Economists call that opportunity cost, right? There was you took the decision to come here, but then you could have done something else. You could have gone on holidays, you could have stayed home, you could have worked more on your PhDs or whatever. So there is cost. People understand the trade-offs, and everyone understands that your potential funders, your stakeholders, it's a common language that you can use. In a business case, I'm going to be talking about the economic component of a business case. If you can quantify the benefits, Eric talked about that really nicely in the first lecture. If you can quantify them in an economic way, that increases the possibility of securing funding. If you can show your funders that, with this amount of certainty, we expect these benefits to occur from our nature-based solution, then the possibility of you getting funding is higher. Instead of saying, you know what, there's going to be some benefits, here's the qualitative qualitative assessment of how they might look. Yes, that could work, but it's more likely if you can quantify those benefits that you can secure funding. If you present different types of benefits and you quantify them, again, that increases your possibility of getting funding. So if you talk about a nature-based solution, you want to improve upstream water quality through conserving a wetland, right? And then downstream that improves water quality for an urban center. If what you want to improve is just water quality, just have one benefit. But if what your nature-based solution will actually provide is not just improvement in water quality, but preventing some flooding, That's an extra benefit that you can actually quantify. That increases your possibility of attracting funding, and maybe funding from different sources, right? Some of it might be from a government source, some of it could actually be crowdfunded, and so on. Transferability. You can transfer your business case to another funder. You can say, okay, this didn't work here, this didn't work with this government agency. I can go to an NGO, I can go to this big corporation. And finally, if you identify the benefits, and I think for me personally this is really important, if you identify the benefits, then you can identify who your funder can be, right? Imagine you have this big NGO who is very keen on some specific things. He's very keen in, providing sort of equal opportunities for people coming from disadvantaged backgrounds. If you go to them and some of the benefits you have presented is actually speaking to the goals and the targets that they have, as you can understand, it's very easy, it's much likely that you get funding. All right, so it's about communicating your findings, communicating your science in a way that people understand, and actually increase your chances of getting funding. All right, so how can they look? Again, I'm going to be talking some of the things that Eric talked about. Right, every time you talk about a nature-based solution, you come up with something that you want to do, you need to define what you want to improve. What is happening right now? What's the status quo? Why are you suggesting a nature-based solution to start with? And then placing costs and benefits on this. And if you just come in, as I said, let's use the example of a wetland that is actually improving water quality. If you say, okay, this is what I want to do, I think it's good, here are the benefits for it. You should also present what is happening right now. What's the water quality in the river right now? What is that costing to people? Which could be, people get sick from poor water quality. People have to travel elsewhere to get bottled water. And then you can compare that with another option. It can be a realistic option, it could be let's say a hypothetical option, it could be something in between your nature-based solution and your status quo. It could be a hybrid between grey infrastructure and a nature-based solution, or just grey infrastructure. And to be honest, like from a practical point of view, looking into grey infrastructure compared to your NBS, it's actually a really good practice, just because for grey infrastructure, the costs are actually more easy to find. So in the case of having a wetland to improve your water quality, think if you have a water treatment plant instead, right? Instead of preserving or creating a wetland upstream, that you actually built up a water treatment plant. You know how much it costs. You build a water treatment plant, you staff it, you know how much it takes to get the license, how much it will be the cost. It's easy for you to find and then to compare it in your business case. Again, then, like, who are the beneficiaries? Who benefits from your nature-based solution? Could that be members? Probably could that be the industry, or could that be the regional government? As you can understand, different beneficiaries could mean actually different benefits and different costs. But if you talk about the members of the public, then you also need to define it geographically. Okay, you talk about the riverine system and improvements in water quality. What's the radius, let's say, around that river that you expect that people will be benefiting from that water quality? Right, that river comes through, how many people are serviced through that river? There's a water company that uses river uses water from that river to give it to people. How far does that go? Can you get information from the water company how many people benefit from it? Again, the same thing with business. I'm going to show you some examples of what that means with businesses and then regional government. Can you make sure that your nature-based solution is aligned with targets and goals that the regional government has? That increases, as we said before, your likelihood of getting funding, but also that increases your ability to be able to monetize those benefits and those costs. You have to define them, costs and benefits. You have to define them as well in terms, and I'll show you an example in the end of how to define them. You have to actually say which of these costs and benefits will actually be immediate, will happen right now in the life cycle of the project. So think about, again, the example of improving water quality through a natural wetland. how long do you think it will take for the wetland to actually sort of start producing those benefits? You're talking about conserving a wetland. That might take a long time, because the wetland that you might be thinking about sort of restoring or improving might be in a poor state. It might take a long time for it to improve, right? So you might expect benefits actually to start happening maybe 10 or 15 years down the project's life, right? You have to account for that. Or there could be actually some wider benefits. We talked about improving water quality and sort of improving protection from flooding. What about, improving well-being? Having more nice environments, more pristine environments, more beautiful environments actually increases the well-being of people. But how long will that take? How long will that take for the environment to be, let's say, as beautiful and as pretty, to actually attract people and improve their well-being? That might, be further down the line. And as Eric said, you don't really have to monetize everything. You can monetize some of them, especially as your benefits get wider and less certain. You can leave them, and just describe them in a qualitative way and not in a quantitative way. And then finally, and this is very important, the time horizon, right? How long will that take? In general, when you make a business case, you have to define a time horizon. So how long will that project take between the start of the project until the end of it? But when we're talking about nature-based solution, your time horizon might be very long. You're talking about nature. Nature stays. It's not like great infrastructure that then needs to be rebuilt or sort of restored or being taken down. So, for example, when people are thinking about building a bridge, the bridge has an end of life cycle, maybe 50 or 100 years. But when you're talking about a wetland, you might actually be longer. You have to define, and then you have to define how those costs for you to implement your nature-based solution come within that timeline. Usually costs come in the start of your project, of the life of your project, and then the benefits usually start coming in the end. Maybe they will increase as the time goes by. And then there's something else which is called discounting. I'll show it to you in an example in the end, which is basically how people sort of support and view environmental projects, nature-based projects, in terms of the future. Do people think that the future will actually be really bad, so we need to do something for the environment now? Or are people sort of not so much concerned about what will happen in the future, and then they're like, it doesn't really matter. But if people are very concerned about something happening and they want it to happen as soon as possible, then that changes how benefits are sort of accrued into in the future. So I would like to show you an example of a nature-based solution, something that I've worked on. It's about, and the nature-based solution is manager realignment. Does anyone know what manager realignment is? All right, good. That's very poor outlook. All right. So manager realignment is this activity that is basically tearing down seawalls, walls that are being built by the shoreline to actually prevent coastal erosion, and then turn them down and allow for the sea to come in to recreate some natural wetlands, mainly salt marshes. This is a case study that was done in the south of, in the east of England, deep in the estuary. It's an estuary that has a salt marsh that has been eroding through the years. The reason why salt marshes erode is because sea level rise. Well, there's an increase in the sea level, and that actually means that there's more salt water coming into the salt marsh. That means that the salt marsh doesn't get dry at some point during the tide in the ebb period, but basically becomes more salty. That means that the salt marshes and all the different vegetation that is there ends up dying. So salt marshes become a little bit patchy. There's no full cover of salt marshes. Salt marshes do provide quite a lot of ecosystem services. They provide carbon sequestration. They store carbon in the sediments. They provide recreational opportunities. People come and they walk their dogs around. People come with their boats and they just go around the canals, because usually you'll find them in the end of a riverine system, in a river delta. So in the deep end, this is what it faces, and the local community has been looking into ways of restoring the salt marsh. So the status quo, remember what we said before, the status quo is that the salt marsh is eroding. You're losing salt marsh extent, and the local community wants to do something about it. So we looked into into three options. The business as usual. You might mainly see that the salt marsh is actually, you see lost patches of water. This is eroded salt marsh. Then what the local community has been doing is they're trying by sort of manual labor to actually sort of replant the salt marsh. They put they bring vegetation with trucks, and then they dump it on the site, and then they put some fence and some posts to actually try to make sure that the vegetation stays where it's supposed to stay. That takes a lot of time, and you cannot really recreate a massive area because of that. Just because there's not enough people, and it's actually quite time consuming. The other thing that has been done in the Deben is using dredging materials, as you see, excavating sort of dredge materials from the river and then just depositing next to the salt marsh. That has some costs. You have to get some licensing just because you remove some material from one place and then you put it somewhere else. You have to check for contaminants in case that you take something that is contaminating and then you put it into an ecosystem. So there's cost for that. There is cost for transporting all of those elements and so on. And then the nature-based solution, or let's say the purely nature-based solution, dredging can also be a nature-based solution, is the monitory alignment. You break down some walls, you allow for the water to come in, and then that creates hopefully some natural salt marshes. The low-lying area that you flood then will become salt marshes, but that has some costs, right? There's an area, there's some land that belongs to some people that now will be flooded. You need to compensate the people for the area they're going to lose. It might be land that is used for grazing. People will have their animals to the graze, or it might be agricultural land, or it might be, they're not used for anything. But there are some costs for it, and then there's also costs for making sure that the salt marsh actually is created. So what they have found is that if you create in that area that will be flooded, if you create some what they call silts, imagine a little bit, some healing type of things that will allow for the water to come in, but when it comes back out after the tide is gone, that not all of the sort of good materials is not actually washed back into the sea, but some of it actually stays into that land and then helps the salt marsh to be created. So these are some of the costs. There are many more, but just very briefly how that might look. And then these are the costs, and then we define the benefits. What are the benefits under those scenarios? So benefits here are the most likely going to be identical, right? You have more carbon sequestration, you have more recreation, you have more increase in well-being, you have increase in tourism. More tourists will come because your salt marsh is actually quite pretty, and then they will come with day boating tours. But based on what we expect the outcome will be, the range of the benefits will change. So if you think that, 7 hectares of salt marsh will be created under monitory alignment, and then 3 hectares of salt marsh will be created under dredging, then there's difference in the volume of benefits. And I'll show you, as I said, in an example later on, how that might look monetary in terms of monetary values. But then, who benefits from nature-based solutions? And I personally think that this is a key aspect of making sure you get funding, right? Because it depends, again, as I said, who benefits from what you do. It can be in an urban setting, or it can be in a semi-urban setting. An example of a nature-based solution is the London Wetland Centre. It's basically a natural wetland adjacent to London, which is a massive population centre, and it's basically allowing for ecosystem to function as it is and provide all the benefits it can provide. Improve water quality, reducing heat, reducing sort of noise pollution, allowing for recreation and things like that. And then you can have a nature-based solution in a semi-urban setting, like those sustainable urban drainage systems, which are basically, you can think of them as big ponds that actually store water instead of having a proper sewage system to take all of the sewage, and drainage system to take all of the excessive water away. You can have a pond that actually stores that, and then it creates an ecosystem. You might have as well, you can have garden roofs. Yeah, we heard about that just before, and mitigate heat island effects and so on. So who benefits from that? In the first example, everyone living and operating within London benefits from that. It can be businesses, it can be individuals. In the semi-urban setting, it depends, right? It depends on the radius. How many people benefit from such a system? It could be a local community, or it could be let's say a big it could be people involved in farming and in agricultural activities, because you build something next to where they operate, and that allows them to benefit from it. As I said, are the benefits local, regional, or global? A global benefit could be carbon sequestration, right? You absorb, there's an ecosystem that stores carbon. That's great, but basically that removes carbon from the global circulation. But you have a nature-based solution that does that, but everybody benefits from it. But if you have flood, protection from flooding, then that's very regional. You shouldn't prioritize between the two or three, but you just have to be able to make sure that people understand what those benefits are. And if you come up with a nature-based solution that the benefits are just global, maybe, depends again who your funder could be, maybe you won't get funding, because there are some people who want things that are regional, they're for us. And then, can you rank the benefits? This is really important. And it's difficult for people coming from a science background, because you might really believe into your nature-based solution. But you need to be realistic in how those benefits can actually look like. Can you say that I'm certain with 50% certainty or 100% certainty that these benefits will happen? There might be hiccups down the road, and your nature-based solution will actually not be realized. Can you make sure that you incorporate uncertainty in your business case and present different estimates of your benefits and your cost based on that uncertainty? That is really important. Actually, sort of doing business cases for environmental aspects, let's say, or environmental projects in government organizations do require, who are actually the funders, do require the people who make the case for that money to actually scale for risk. How certain are you that those risks will actually change your benefits? And then present your overall estimates based on uncertainty and risk. What type of other benefits do you expect to happen from your nature-based solution? I'll show you some examples later on how that could look like. And there could be some co-benefits, some extra benefits, or some benefits you haven't really planned for, but actually they exist. Leave some room for uncertainty, for positive uncertainty this time. Okay? And then, do you have a plan B or a plan C for that nature-based solution? Is that possible to say, okay, if that doesn't work, then we can do this? Because, for example, if you suspect that the local community might not support that nature-based solution for whatever reason, can you make sure that you get, let's say, support from a local NGO to help you make that NBS a reality? And then sort of incorporate that into your business case. Let me show you some examples of how that thing might work. So there might be some hidden economic and environmental costs. And so these are real life examples. One of them is that is a reservoir in Abington that was built in the Thames river system. So the problem in the Thames was that there was low water flow during the summer months. There wasn't enough water. And the idea was to create a tank to create a reservoir that actually stores water during the wet months, and then you release that water back into circulation during the dry months. What happened though is that as the water was being stored in that reservoir, it became nutrient rich because of the increase in temperature. That meant that more phytoplankton was actually created, and then cyanobacteria, and then all of that came into the water circulation for the Thames. And then that got into, that water, there was water abstraction for drinking water for the whole London area. And then that water also was used by industry to cool off their machinery, their engines. But the poor water quality caused costs to them. You had to treat that water. You had to improve the water treatment. You had higher water treatment costs for drinking water purposes, and then for cooling water purposes. So the idea was that you do something that is good for the environment, but what you couldn't foresee actually made you having bigger costs than you actually planned for. And for an example with the monetary alignment thing, in something that happened in Norfolk again, generally the East have big issues with sea level rise and coastal erosion. They tried to do monetary alignment, but because there were sort of, again, hiccups in the road, people didn't really want to sell their property, or they went to court in how about, oh, my property actually that will be flooded is more valuable than you actually say it is. So the cost went from £150,000 to £750,000, and the project was delayed, so it took much longer than they expected. So you might have a good idea, but you might not get buy-in from the local. There might be other aspects that actually come into place, right? But then there might be actually things that are actually quite. Can you hear me now? No, you can't. I didn't do anything. Right, so I will continue so we don't lose any time. So you can have actually something that is, let's say, more positive and more beneficial without you actually sort of planning for it. So I have some colleagues working a project in Colombia, and it's not necessarily a nature-based solution, because what the Colombian government wants to do is they actually want to make farmers stop growing coca in their fields. Coca is actually a really easy plant to grow. It doesn't take a lot of cost for people. You just cut down the forest, tropical forest, and you just plant some coca and just grow it. You don't need to take care of it. And the only thing then you need to do is you need to make a paste. You take the coca leaves and you make them into a paste, and then someone with a backpack can take it into a processing center that then, through chemical processing, becomes cocaine. The government is actually trying to stop farmers in Colombia doing that, also because they cause deforestation, right? So the nature-based solution now is to actually stop deforestation, all the problems it causes. And there's a really interesting documentary, you can click on that link and find it. It's basically the farmers saying that the government has done all sorts of different things to actually encourage dropping down the rates of coca sort of production. They have tried, destroying the plantation with pesticide, with planes. They have actually tried to incentivize farmers by giving them money to switch into other types of production. But what the farmers actually say is that what actually works best is if you make roads, if you make road systems. Can you make our properties available, sort of connected through road systems, so they can actually transport our goods? Because for them, agricultural goods take a lot of money to actually be transported. Yeah? No? Okay. So what they end up doing is that it's too costly for them to put the product in a van or a truck and then transport it into a collection center or into a center that people will buy it from. But if you make roads, then that cost goes down, right? Instead, you don't have to take a backpack with some coca paste and then go and bring it somewhere, right? So the positive spillover by making road systems can actually reduce your deforestation, right? Does that make any sense? And then another example is something that I've done with some of my colleagues in the island of Fiji. So Fiji people want to make more money in the country. It's a poor country, but they have really pristine environments, really beautiful environments, especially coral reefs and beaches. And for them, the way to do it is, let's get more tourists to come. Let's get more tourists coming into the island. But the island they're not big, and they're sort of landlocked. So the more people who come, the more stress you put on the environment. So the government is trying to find a way in between. So what we did was we looked into sustainable tourism, options about sustainable tourism that respects and doesn't put pressure on the environment and still allows the people to enjoy it. So what we did was that we said we looked into what is happening locally. So Fiji is really interesting from a social and anthropological point of view, because for the native people, environment is not something out there. It's not an ecosystem. Well, environment and people are one. You cannot remove people, residents, local people from the environment. But apart from that, you have a third overlapping thing. For them, history and personal history as well is part of the environment. So their ancestors, for them, they live and they exist in that environment. You've heard the word taboo, right? Taboo comes from the South Pacific. The Polynesian people use that word. Taboo for them is an area that you don't really go to, not because it's just sacred or something bad will happen to you, that as well, but also is that because for them it's part of their identity. So and for them a taboo area could be a strip of water that you see further down the sea, because for them their ancestors used to paddle their canoes there. So for them, that's a taboo area. So when I go with my motorboat because I'm a tourist and I just go sailing around the island, for them this is disrespectful. But they also make money out of it. So they have this trade-off that they lose money, they lose the respect and the value that they have for the environment because their environment is being desecrated by the people who come and they bring money to the community. So the idea was that can we give property rights to local sort of indigenous communities? That area, that coastline, that beach, that coral reef, that inshore area actually belongs to you and you are responsible for managing it. And you manage it based on your traditions. They call it vanua. Environment, people, and ancestors, all of it belongs to vanua. So you manage it based on those principles. And then what we did was actually asked visitors coming from Western countries, are you willing to support, to finance something like this? If there was, if you went to Fiji, if you traveled from the UK and you went to Fiji and suddenly you found out, you know what, you cannot visit that area because that's a taboo area and people actually don't want you to come at that point of time. Because for 6 months that area is blocked. Because for their tradition, you don't go there, no one touches that area. Would you be willing to still come to the island and still support it financially? Actually, we found that people are very much willing to do so. They're very willing to pay, in other words, they were willing to pay £75 per visit to actually do that. So you actually tell people now in the government that you have a potential funding stream for people to be able to do that work. While you present your environment, you respect the local norms and the local sort of beliefs, and then you increase your tourism income. But we didn't start with the idea that you might respect the local community. We started the idea, well, let's do something good for the environment, but then you get those extra benefits. And finally, something that I think is sort of quite modern is that how can you have your business case being more effective? And I think it's really important, especially nowadays, that can the business case solve any ongoing social issue? Can it sort of increase employment? Can it increase education? Can it decrease gender inequality? Can it provide access to education to groups of population groups that they don't have access to it? Some of my colleagues have done some work in the Philippines. So the Philippines, in the southeast of Philippines, the Philippines have they have these coastal communities that basically they live on fishing. They are fishing communities. So the men go out fishing, the women stay back and they take care of the household. But as a secondary income, many of the women grow seaweed, which is basically tiny little grass on the real inshore areas. And then they dry it and then they sell it for food or for fertilizer. But what has actually been happening is because of overfishing, there's not enough fishing left. So people do not make enough living for them. So the men do not make enough living. So the government is trying to see, can they actually increase the seaweed farming in a way, in the seafood production, that actually people switch from fishing to seaweed farming. But while they were doing some workshops and some participatory workshops, actually what they found was that actually there were women who were the ones who were participating more. And the women were more interested to actually improve their seaweed cultivation practices. And the reason, there were various reasons, men didn't want to be associated with doing something that is associated that women are doing, but what people actually found was that during those meetings that women like this, they were actually empowered because they would make more money. That meant that they will have more saying in decision making in the household. They will be able to actually have access to education, not general education, but education on how to improve their seaweed farming. So for you, actually the project ideally was actually to reduce unemployment, but you not just increase employment, hopefully by increasing your seaweed farming and finding ways of making your seaweed farming more efficient, but you actually decrease a social issue. So if you present something like that, it's much more likely that your funders will like it and they would like to fund it. Right? You solve something environmental, you solve something social. But then you have to be actually really aware of, and that's my final point, of who is the primary cost bearer of your NBS. Right? We talked about improving an area. We talked about before the boundary alignment. Someone's going to lose their land because it's going to be flooded. They bear a cost. Right? There's a cost for that. I did some work in my PhD about the implementation of the Water Framework Directive, this European Commission directive. And it was basically you need to have a specific level of water quality in all European rivers. And because in order to do that, you need to change some activities in those places. And we did a case study in Greece, in the Louros catchment up in the northwest. And what we basically found was that if the Water Framework Directive was to be implemented in that river area, it would be the farmers who actually would bear the majority of the cost, because it would be the farmers who would have to change their farming practices. They would have to stop using fertilizers that contain nitrogen and phosphorus. That means that they would lose an income. But the benefits would actually be enjoyed by everyone, by people living in the urban cities further downstream, from the people working in the agricultural sector who will have better water quality for irrigation. But the farming community will bear the brunt of the cost. And the idea then is that worth it? You know, is it worth it you suggesting an NBS that will actually solve a problem, but might create a bigger problem to a specific community? Is there any ways out for that community because of your NBS and the impact that it will have? Right? So you have to think about it in order to make sure that there is social equity. Right? We shouldn't come in with our great ideas how to change the environment and then actually damage and impact livelihood and activities. So now, that's it from me. I have, and I want you to tell me, I have a spreadsheet with how a business case with the 3 different options might look like with costs and benefits. Are you interested in seeing that? Yeah? So you can also find it in your Google Drive. If you look at it, it's an Excel spreadsheet. And you can actually, ideally for you should click on the different tabs to be able to see how the calculations are made. So I'm using the example of the manager alignment. So if you go to your slides, if you go back to that so you can see the different options, that'll actually be great. So what I will be doing actually in this, and what that example is basically applying costs and benefits and how they look into a 40-year time horizon. So I'll talk about the discounting thing, I'll talk about how benefits and costs might look for different projects, okay? So the numbers that I use there are not, you can use them, it's fine, they're not, some of them are not entirely real, but they're close to the real thing. And you can see that, right? Okay. So here I have what is yellow. So that's supposed to be yellow, that's supposed to be green, okay? So in my laptop they look different, right? So what is yellow is actually costs, right? So different types of costs for the different types of options. I have three different options. We have the status quo, the business as usual, which is basically doing nothing, having no nature-based solution, and then having manager alignment, which is the nature-based solution, and then having dredging, which is, let's say, a hybrid. I know it's not, Eric, but let's say it's a hybrid. Okay? It's a hybrid? Good. Okay. So I have different costs here, okay? Not all of them apply for all of the options, but you can see, so I have dredging costs. Can someone tell me, based on what I just told you, where they could actually apply? Could they apply in the manager alignment option? Will they apply for the business as usual, or will they apply for the dredging option? Any takers? Yeah, just say it out loud. Let me help you. Dredging comes when you talk about dredging. Remember that slide with the excavator? If you take material and then you place it somewhere else to create a salt marsh, then that's a dredging cost. You do it every year because things accumulate in the riverbed and you need to remove that every year. That's why they say annual dredging costs. So that's a unit that you need to add every year that you expect that in the lifetime of your project. Then, I'm not going to go through all of them, but you have losses from tourism. The idea is that if you had if you had more salt marshes, more people would come. But because you don't, you lose a potential income. So that's an annual loss in potential income from tourism. More people coming and spending money, right? Parking permits to park in that parking area you have so that can visit the salt marsh. Don't pay for boat rides to go and visit that area. Do not pay to stay in a hotel or an Airbnb. So you lose some income. Then you have costs here for preparatory works in low-lying areas. Remember I told you about those silt system, building those sort of curvilinear things to keep the water in. This is cost that only applies for monetary alignment, right? You don't do it for anything else. You just do it in case you have monetary alignment. Then you have annual cost of maintenance of seawalls. If you have a seawall, then you need to maintain it. You need to reinforce it. You need to find the areas that actually is not being actually working perfectly, and then you actually so it costs something. If you have monetary alignment, then you don't have any cost for taking care of the seawalls. But if you do the business as usual, then you have it every year. Also in the case of dredging, because when you have dredging, you still have some impact, some damage on your seawalls. Well, so very quickly, I'll show you how that looks in a let's say simplified example. So you see here it says business as usual. That's the option. Then I have the different costs, and if you see there, you can actually go back to that sheet and basically see all the costs that I have taken into account. So basically, these are maintenance costs for seawalls and for dredging. So you do that because if you don't do anything, if there's no hybrid or nature-based solution, purely nature-based solution, and then you have no benefits. I assume that there are no benefits because there's no new salt marsh creation. There's nothing new coming. You can make the case that there's still some benefits because there is still some salt marsh, but to make it easy, then I've put nothing. Right, and then if you look in the end, I've put 40 years as a time horizon. You see, there's 40 years here, and then this is the sum of the costs. 2.2 million euros, and then there's no benefits. And then I have the discounting. So the discounting now, it's a big discussion, but basically, as I said, it's about this thing. And then if you have people caring more about the future and they're more concerned about the environment, then you have a declining discount rate. It goes down, and for you to see how that looks, it's that second line here. It's basically, you divide it. So this is your discount rate, which is different from this one. This is bigger, which means that people care more about the environment in the future. So the future benefits are actually higher in year 40 with the declining discount rate than they are with the non-declining one. So the declining discount rate is used, for example, by the UK Treasury. This is what they do in all the environmental problems, because they say the environment is actually being destroyed, so people actually care about the environment, they have more value in the future. Right? But other government organizations, they actually say, no, let's use a stable one. So that's why I have a 5% here, but then I start with 3.5, and then after 30 years it becomes 3. That's how much the decline is, like 0.5%. It's not that much. You'll see how that looks when I do the total. So this is the total net. This is the net present value. This is costs minus benefits that are discounted. Okay, and there is a minus in that cell, if you see close to the euro sign, and it's minus 15. So there's a negative benefit. There's no benefit. There's just costs here. Right? It's costly for the society. It's costly for the economy to not do anything to increase the salt marsh. Again, the same thing. I'm not going to go through the different types of costs and benefits. You can see by clicking on the different tabs which ones I have included. But if you have dredging, then the total is again negative, but it's much less. So you still lose some money, but not as much as you lose before. Actually, no, sorry, it's more in this case. Just because I assume, it doesn't mean it's right, this is hypothetical, I assume that the dredging is not done correctly, right? It doesn't create a lot of benefits. And then I have the nature-based solution, and you see here that it's actually positive. But if you just, I would like to leave you with, do you see that the cost here is different in year 1 than it's in year 2? So in year 1, what I've done, and this is what it's important for you to think about, I have assumed that in year 1, you buy all the property that you want to flood, and that's a cost, so it's $500,000 of cost, right? But that comes only in year 1. Then in year 2, there's other costs that are coming across, which is basically taking care of the new salt marsh, right? But then I have assumed no benefits for the first 10 years. Just because I assume that the salt marsh will actually not be functioning well enough to provide any benefits. The benefits actually start to happen after year 10. You see year 11, and they're stable. I'm talking about more carbon sequestration and a value for that. You'll see that in the example. So if you go, if I show you again the net present value, then this time it's positive. And the next one here, the darker blue, is with a discounting, with a declining discount rate. So you see that this number is bigger because people care more about the environment because now, and someday will happen in the future, the benefits are bigger. And those numbers below are basically what they call the benefit cost ratio. You just take those benefits and then you divide them by the cost. And the general rule is that you need to have them bigger and to be bigger than the unity, bigger than 1, which basically means that if you give €1 for your to finance your MBS, you'll get at least €1 back. That's what the unity is. If you have 4, that means you give €1, but then you get €4 in benefits. So in this case, it's below the unity with a non-declining discount rate, but then becomes bigger than 1. As a general rule, people want to see like really big ones, between 3 and 7, right? 3 and 7 benefit cost ratios as a unity. Some UK government organizations, they will not fund anything that is below 7. But that's what the funders want. And if you have within your options, if you have different alternatives based on uncertainty, based on incorporating and having more benefits quantified, then that will change. And then it's up to the funder to decide which one they're willing to actually consider as the most realistic. But you provide them with different options, and then they might actually be able to fund it. So that's it for me. Thank you for your attention. Any questions? Yes, please.
Just a question about this example. I guess when the seawall was built, it was also meant to protect from coastal flooding, right?
Yeah.
But I don't see, just in this example, you didn't put it in there, that then what's the flood protection value of the South Marsh versus the seawall?
It's a really good point. Yes, so we can do that as well. You can put that as, you need to have it, you need to decide though what's the unity that you're measuring. Is it the area that it's flooded? It's the houses that are not being flooded. It's the value of the area that is actually staying protected. And then you compare that with what's happening with the salt marsh. The idea is that the salt marsh actually gives you more environmental benefits, but then you quantify. But then ideally you need to have that. But you need to make the case that, are you talking about building new seawalls or sort of preserving your salt marsh? Are you making the case that you're going to build something or you maintain it? These are different costs that you need to take into account. So I guess it will be easier if someone says, oh, I would like to build a wall, this is much more expensive than maintaining one. And then you compare it with sort of having a salt marsh. Yeah. Another question? Yes, please.
So most of the costs and benefits are very measurable, but you have there the carbon sequestration. So
yeah.
Do you feel in your experience that it's easy to convince a decision maker based on, because in that example the carbon sequestration will be key on the final calculations?
Yeah, that's a really good point, thank you. So you can be, as the English say, a little bit cheeky in this, because there's a lot of talk about carbon now. And there's a lot of talk about sort of, having systems that actually store and sequester carbon. So I have here, you can see in your example, I have 3 different economic estimates for a unit of carbon, for a ton of carbon. So these are the ones that are used in the literature, and this is what different agencies and government organizations are using, which are basically unit costs, and they come from different times. And as you can see here, for a fixed area, you see the difference in value, right? So what these costs measure is basically what they call avoidance costs. If you have carbon outside of the environment and people do not breathe the carbon or the excessive carbon, then they will not have to go to hospital to get treatment. They will not lose their jobs, or they will not lose some days of going to work because they have poor respiratory system. But so they save money, or the government is saving money from the health system to take care of those people. So, and then we also talk about not building infrastructure to protect from things that happen because of carbon, excessive carbon. So these things, then they create some unit estimates, and then they put that into different values. That's why here, and this is what I do in my work, I present the range of those estimates. And I say, look, there's a big range, and see how that range actually changes your benefit cost ratio. And then again, you leave it to the funder, but you do your work, you do your research, and then you present it to people. So you can make the case that salt marshes actually, and this is true, they capture more carbon than any of the terrestrial ecosystems we have in Europe. Right? Mangroves, which are those things that are, by those trees that are by salt water, they capture actually most of the times more than the tropical forests do. So you can make the case that there's huge potential here, and I'm showing you the range of potential benefits here. It's up to you. Do you take the lower one because your funder is risk averse, or they're really for the environment, they won't take the bigger one? But you give them as an option. Okay. Yes, please.
Yes, I have two questions actually.
Yes.
One of them is about the negative externalities that you talked about.
Yeah.
You mentioned the same example.
Yeah.
I was wondering, do you calculate the externalities before or after implementation?
Ideally before, and you tell that to your funder what's going to happen, because otherwise then your nature-based solution might not be as effective as you want it to be. Right, so you try to anticipate, but it's possible that you cannot anticipate. Something might happen that you haven't foreseen. It's ideal if you do it before.
In the case of the Thames was before?
No, it was after. Yeah, so it's like, oh yeah, let's build it, and they did. And then they found out later when they did some monitoring that there's cyanobacteria there.
And the other question was, that you in the beginning you gave the example of the spoiled oil in the US.
Yeah.
And we had also a case in Spain, Prestige, in 2002,
Exactly.
if
Yeah.
I'm not mistaken. And this was more like a cross-border situation. So how would you then calculate something like that in a cross-border situation?
Yeah, it's quite difficult. So the US example was easy because it just went in the US. So there's actually something similar happening now with marine litter, with marine plastics that actually float, right? So they go to different shorelines in different areas. And again, it's like, okay, who emits them, and then who is responsible to pay? So this is more about who has the responsibility, and then making sure that you enforce that. So usually the problem with that is saying, okay, there's the cost, we have calculated how much was the damage to the environment, but then can you actually get the people who are responsible for the damage to pay? So that's the problem here. So if it was easy with BP because we knew who that was, and then they went to court and they said, okay, we are happy to pay that. Actually, in the Deepwater Horizon, it was 1.2 trillion US dollars. Sorry, 1.2 billion, sorry, not trillion. So it was a lot of money. But yeah, so the idea is that you define if you can, who is responsible, and then how much is the impact on the cross borders, and making sure that people actually pay and enforce that, right? So that has to do with agreements between. Is it a government type of thing, country between country? Is it between neighborhoods? Is it between regional states? Has to be more about enforcement.